Chapter 18 of the Boy Scouts of the Rockies. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Shasta, Oakland, California. The Boy Scouts in the Rockies by Herbert Carter. Chapter 18. Pure Pluck. Well, I'm glad they're departed, because somehow I couldn't fancy that Mr. Rawson the least little bit, remarked Smithy an hour later. Do you really think they have gone for good, Toby? Step-Hen asked eagerly. Or might they just make believe and hang around here to see if we had Alec Rawson hidden away somewhere? Oh, they're gone, that's right enough, replied the guide, but I'm kinder of the notion they'll make it a point to pay a visit to the other camp by morning and perhaps sneak in on 'em by surprise like. Then you're of a mind that they have suspicions? Asked Step-Hen. That thar Artemus Rawson, I reckon he allers has suspicions of everybody, replied Toby, and I seen him watching you two boys pass winks and nods when the sheriff, he happened to say the gent's name was Rawson. Then he must have guessed that we knew something about Alec, declared Davy. Reckon as how he did, Toby responded. But if that was so, how did it come that it never once asked us if we knew a boy by the name of Alec Rawson? Step-Hen went on. He was just a leetle too slick for that, the guide answered. He knowed that you'd make up your mind to deny everything, and he guessed how the land laid. So right now, I shouldn't wonder a bit but what he's a-telling Bob all about it, and showing him how they'll as like as not find the boy they want right smack in the camp of Boy Scouts. You're right, Toby, cried Step-Hen. Now I remember that the sheriff seemed a little bit inclined to put up all night with us, but it was the other who said he wanted to be on the move. He even asked how long it would take to reach the main valley over on the other side of this ridge by following the canyon route, and vowed he was good for a few hours' tramp if the sheriff was agreeable. Yes, and he told how one of their horses came down lame, so they had to leave both animals in place to rest up while they was in the mountains, remarked the guide. But it's sure too bad the way things is setting for that boy. You mean Alec, I guess, don't you, Toby? Asked Step-Hen. Yes, Alec Rawson. I wanted to see the kid get that mine his dad found years ago. But seems to me the woods is full of people as think they orter have a claim on it afore the family of Jerry Rawson. If so be this old chap is an uncle to the boy, he's a bad egg. I can see that in his face. But Sheriff Bob thinks he's doing the right thing trying to arrest Alec, and he'll take him away if he ever lays eyes on him. I say it's too bad. If we could only warn them, said Smithy disconsolately. Maybe we can, remarked Step-Hen, eagerly looking at the guide in the same breath, as though it depended a good deal upon Toby whether this idea could be carried out or not. Oh, do you really mean it, Step-Hen? Demanded Smithy, brightening up, for he seemed to be conscious of a new sense of reliance in the other nowadays, something similar to that he felt in Thad himself. Step-Hen had been doing things, and that alone breeds confidence. I'm wanting to ask Toby something first before I promise. remarked the other, cautiously, as became one who valued his word not lightly. "Go on, then. What is it?" asked the guide. "Think hard, please," Step-Hen continued, very soberly, "and tell me if you believe you could take me to a place not a great ways off, where we would be able to see the tents of the home camp if daylight was here." Toby's face turned into a grin. Evidently he grasped the idea that had flashed into the boy's mind. After having seen how Giraffe had talked with Alec by means of fire flashes when the Rawson boy was away up on that ledge of the cliff, Toby was ready to believe these wonderful scouts capable of almost anything in the line of next miracles. "Say, yes, I can do that same now. That is, if you think you'd be able to climb a little bit more," he broke out with. "Oh, I'm not all tuckered out yet," declared Step-Hen, proudly. "A bit sore from my scratches, and that funny business when I had to jump around so lively with two savage eagles trying to tear my eyes out. But you just show me, Toby, and see if I don't toe the mark, like a scout always should." "I'm sure you will," said Toby, admiringly, and the look on his face gave Step-Hen a sense of reward for all he had suffered. In fact, he could not remember ever feeling so pleased before, because he knew Toby Smathers was reckoned a prime judge of men as they ran. "How long would it take us to get up there?" asked Step-Hen, carelessly, yet no doubt with more or less anxiety, for he was conscious of the fact that however willing the spirit might be, the flesh was weak, and it meant a double trip to go and come again. "Perhaps half an hour might do it," was the response of the guide. "Up a place like this?" gasped Smithy, pointing to the wall near them. "Well, I should hope not," said Davy Jones. "They'd be crazy to try that sort of thing with only the moonlight to help." Step-Hen did not say anything, but nevertheless he waited with bated breath to hear the reply of the guide, and seemed easier in his mind when Toby remarked: "I don't doubt as he'd foller me, if I says we must climb up to the top of that same cliff again, but 'tain't necessary. This time we can foller a canyon up, till we gets to a p'int as gives you a view of the valley. I don't sure know, but I reckons we orter be able to catch a glimpse of the fire." "Then let's start right now!" cried Step-Hen. "I'm all worked up with eagerness to block the little game that old Rawson uncle is setting up for poor Alec. We said that we'd see the boy through, and we're going to do it, or drop in our tracks a-tryin'." He managed to get on his feet, but only with an effort. "Oh, yes, I admit I'm some stiff," he said in answer to Smithy's look of sympathy, "and I'd like as not let Davy do it in my place, only he ain't up in sending messages as much as I am. Wish Giraffe was here. He's the boss hand at that. But perhaps I can make Thad understand. I only hope we get the camp all right, that's all." It was the spirit that makes heroes that forced Step-Hen to quit that cozy camp, where he was feeling so nice and comfortable, and follow after the tireless guide when he walked on up the canyon. But they would not hear a single groan from him if he had to make his lips bleed biting them with his teeth. Step-Hen had always wondered just how old the martyrs felt, when they were being led to the stake. He believed he knew now, for he experienced a fierce sense of exultation with every twinge of pain that walking gave him, but with set teeth he kept grimly on. That was a long half hour to the scout. He would never forget it to his dying day. And when Toby finally, after what seemed an eternity, announced that they must be very close on the point, where in the moonlight much of the big valley could be seen dimly beyond, Step-Hen mentally thanked his stars again and again. Presently Toby turned and looked. "Here she is," he remarked, and the boy grunted in reply, for there may be times when the spirit of thanksgiving is too deep for utterance. "I see her," Toby remarked almost immediately afterwards. "Do you mean the fire, Toby?" demanded Step-Hen. "It can't be anything else, even though they've let it get low. And now we've a job afore us to get some blaze started right here. Wood ain't too plenty round these parts. Let's look for some." But when Step-Hen started after him, the guide made him sit down to rest, promising to come to him when the fire was good and ready. "Your part of the work will begin about that time. Let me do this fire making," the good-hearted guide insisted, and the boy was only too willing to sink down. A short time afterwards, when Toby came to announce that the fire was in full blast with plenty of good brands that might be used for torches, he found poor Step-Hen sound asleep, just as he had dropped, being utterly exhausted. The guide looked down at him with pity. He had taken a great fancy for the plucky scout and disliked arousing him the worst kind, but there was no other way. Step-Hen had to be shaken half a dozen times before he would consent to open his heavy eyes. Then he stared up at Toby as though for the moment he could not place things. "I got the fire started, and there's a plenty of wood handy after all for you to use as torches when you signal the camp," said the guide kindly. "Oh!" cried Step-Hen, sitting up. "To be sure, and I really think I must have been dozing while you were doing all the work, Toby. Give me a hand, won't you, please? I'm ashamed to say my legs seem so silly stiff at the knees I just can't straighten 'em out. Wow! To think of me being such a baby as to feel that little circus this way. I'm real ashamed, that's what." "You ain't got no call to be, I promise you, boy," declared the other, a tremor in his voice. "You showed the pluck of a grown man, and if I could 'a' took your place, which of course I couldn't, never having been trained to wigwag or handle a telegraph key, I'd sure let you sleep on, for you deserve it, that's right." Step-Hen made a few movements, regardless of the pain it gave him, so as to get his arms in working order, because he knew he would have to use them a great deal if he were lucky enough to get an answer to his signals. The guide showed him where to stand, where he would be in the shadow, and the blazing, moving torch show, as he then pointed out the distant fire down through the gap in the mountain chain. "They ain't touched it since we came here," he remarked, "but that makes me think it might be done any minute now. So p'raps you'd better show me the way to fling that there torch around to let 'em know we're here and wantin' to talk. I can do that part, I reckons, and save you some work." Step-Hen was agreeable, for he knew that it would have all he could do later on to handle that beacon should he find a chance to send the message he wanted the scoutmaster to get. For some time Toby waved his torch around without there being any response, and it began to look as though he might have all his trouble for his pains when Step-Hen was heard to give a little eager cry. "There!" he exclaimed. "I believe I saw a light move just then. Yes, look, Toby, there it is again, and as sure as you live they're answering us. Now, give me the torch. I only hope I haven't forgotten all I knew about sending messages, because all poor Alec's hopes for his future may hang on my being able to warn them the sheriff and old Artemus Rawson are heading their way. Now watch close, Toby. I'm going to start in." End of chapter 18.